I'm sure people have time constraints and things to do here, so we'll kind of zip through. Anton told you guys. Anton told you guys a little bit. Let me just. So Anton told you guys a little bit about me, so we'll kind of breeze through that. And so yeah, we'll start back at the top here. So the focus of the presentation is your site stuck? So, and particularly we want to get to why is your site stuck? What can you do to get your site unstuck? And walk through and give you some real life examples of things that have worked and an actual case study of how we got a site unstuck. So again, we'll try to get through these slides a little bit more quickly, and definitely please shoot a note in the chat if you're not hearing me this time. So being stuck, a lot of sites have this kind of flat traffic graph. And what I said on this slide is you want to focus on that your flat graph and that your stuck is really stuck, and you're focusing on the right KPIs. So stuck isn't really like you're not getting a lot of new Twitter followers or you're not getting new page likes on your Facebook page. It's, is your traffic, your leads, your sales, and your ROI, is that flattened out from your content and SEO efforts? And so when you think about that, usually what I find is that your output, the actual traffic growth that you want, will be a result of your input. So you need to think not just, oh, I'd like to have more traffic, but think about why aren't I getting more traffic? What has gotten me stuck? And specifically, some of the things that we find frequently get sites stuck are outdated SEO tactics. So are you paying a couple $100 a month in SEO consulting and expecting your business to explode? Are a lot of the links that you're getting forum signature links, blog comment links, links from really dodgy looking sites, low quality sites where all you did was give somebody the keyword that you want to rank for and the page, and they went and did a lot of work for very little money? Generally, that's not going to result in consistent gains over time. And if you do see some gains, you're going to be subject to some different penalties and or a flattening out. So a lot of sites are using outdated SEO tactics and expecting results when that's really not the way that the marketplace works anymore. So not having any inputs is common, and this was kind of the issue with the site that we'll talk about. If you're not publishing new content consistently and you're not promoting that content, then it's going to be very difficult for your site to grow. There may be some tweaks and updates that you can make that can give you a little bit of instant gain, but to have consistent growth over time and to have that graph go up and to the right, you will need consistent input. So if you're not producing any content, if your site is kind of a brochure site without a lot of valuable resources, that's potentially one reason why you're stuck. You may also be publishing some content and doing some promotion, but you might be doing it wrong. So you may be creating the wrong type of content, not executing on content outreach, or doing it in a way that is ineffective and inefficient. So if your blog is really self-referential and you're putting out stuff like, oh, this is the news about our company, this is how great we are, this is what we think about a specific topic, and really you're not even talking about the topic, you're just talking about how great your product or service is, then that's a very common type of site that gets stuck, because those types of posts, that type of content is not going to get shared, and it's not going to get seen very frequently. And even if you did outreach to promote that, no one would really want to link to it, and most people wouldn't really be incented to share it because it's all about you. It's not about anybody else. So we'll talk about some of the assets that do work, but having that type of content and maybe just promoting it through, like we're just going to tweet it from our Twitter account and share it on our Facebook page, that's a really common way that we see that sites get stuck. So what we'll talk about is how to get unstuck and some of the things that work to actually grow traffic over time. So the case study here is a site called Safe Sound Family. It's a family and home safety publishing site that my company owns and operates. So we pay writers to research and write posts on relevant topics. We monetize the site through affiliate links and advertising. And in 2014, the site was stuck. And the main reason that it was stuck, as we look at kind of self-analysis, is we weren't publishing content consistently. Again, we have a portfolio of sites. We had kind of neglected this one. So you can't expect to just have a site grow when you're not consistently putting some sort of input into it and publishing and promoting new content. So we went from flat traffic growth to 5xing traffic in around 9 months, and we'll walk through how we did that here. So again, the first thing that you need to look at is self-awareness. Look at what you're doing and what has worked well for you previously, because even if your site is flattened out, in this case that site had generated around 7 to 8,000 uniques a month. So that's not quite where we wanted to be traffic-wise, but there were some things that were working. So okay, great. Let's look at what worked on the site, and let's look at what hasn't, and be honest about kind of why we were stuck. So as you think about analyzing your own site and figuring out what worked and what didn't, there are a few tools that are really helpful. So one is Google Analytics. But an important thing to note about Google Analytics is that Google has obfuscated a lot of the search query and keyword data that you would get from around organic search from within Google Analytics. So that data is not particularly useful. The stuff that is useful in Google Analytics from an organic search and content marketing perspective is to look at the traffic that you're getting by the page level. And so there's an outline of how to do that here. You create a custom report. You look at users and goal completion. So if your site is an e-commerce site, you might have different kinds of goals. You might want to use revenue or different kinds of goals depending on what your niche is. And then you want to look at the landing page as the dimension. And from there, you can actually, as we'll see on the next slide, layer on a custom filter, an advanced filter, for organic traffic only, and look at the pages that are driving the most organic traffic. So these pages are going to be useful to you in two ways. One, they're going to signal to you opportunities where you've had success and could maybe squeeze a little bit more out of those pages and get even more success. And two, they're going to help indicate to you what has been working well and what you might want to do more of, what content types are generating the most traffic. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of those as we look at some of the other tools that you can use to gather data. So another really helpful tool is Google Search Console. So this used to be called Google Webmaster Tools, and as you can see, the URL is webmasters-tools. And so if you look at search traffic, search queries, this is where you actually can get some useful data on the actual search terms that people are using to get to your site. So that data is not readily available in Google Analytics anymore, but it is available in Search Console. So if you don't have an account set up, it's fairly easy. You can go to their help materials to figure out how. You need access to be able to update your site. And once you do that, you can get into the tool and look at the query data and then the top pages as well. And you can see not just the people who come to your site, but how many impressions your search result listing has gotten. So that means not just the people who click on your listing, but the people who saw it and didn't click. So that data can be really valuable, because if you look at carbon monoxide detector placement here, we see that that has a much lower click-through rate than some of the other pages that are driving traffic. So that would be a good opportunity to look at that page and say, okay, let's look at the title tag and the meta description for this page and how it's showing up in search results, and maybe we can tweak that a little bit to get a lift in click-through rate, which might get us a lot more traffic for that page, right? So we can, again, use this tool to understand what has worked historically, and also see some opportunities for optimizations, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So the third tool here is SEMRush, and this is basically a competitive research tool, but you can use it on your own site too. And there are a few different competitive research tools, Keyword Spy and SpyFu as well. I like SEMRush and use SEMRush. There's a free trial, I believe, and it's $70 a month. I think the other tools are comparably priced. So what you can use SEMRush for is to look at low-hanging fruit, so kind of immediate opportunities for you to optimize against. Because what you can do is look at things that are ranking high, so maybe position 5 to 20, but not ranking first, right? So if something's already ranking first, that's not much of an optimization opportunity, obviously. And things that have high estimated search volume. So maybe there's something, so you can see a couple instances of this below, right, where we're position 12, position 18, position 14, and if we gave those pages a little bit of a boost, we might see a really big traffic bump, because we know that those pages have some interesting search volume, because we're sorting by search volume. And the way that you can optimize for those pages is to link really aggressively and feature those pages within your site. So think about putting them in the navigation, in your right navigation, in your site's top navigation and highlighting them perhaps, putting them into your footer, right? Linking to them from within the content of really popular pages, if you can do that naturally, and really pushing to those. And or if you're doing things on external sites, like maybe you have a regular guest post that you write someplace that gets contributed, maybe you have some partners who would be willing to link to you, you can highlight these pages and get external links into these pages where you have an opportunity and boost those and get those moved up a little bit. So that's another opportunity where, you know, kind of looking back at your own site and your own data can help. And we did a lot of that as we tried to help grow traffic for Safe Sound Family. So the other thing you want to do is obviously look at the sales data, right? So what's actually driving revenue, sales, leads. So sometimes, depending on your setup, this data can be kind of hard to link to where people are coming from. So it might be really difficult to see, okay, which page did people land on that they converted on, which search term drove what. But within Google Analytics, e-commerce sites particularly can get a lot of insight into this. If you're using Marketo or Salesforce or something similar, you can usually at least, you know, get some data around this. You want to try to figure this out as much as you can, so that, again, you can find out, okay, what types of content actually drive sales, right, and actually drive revenue, and how can we replicate that success and or push those. I'm going to jump back to, I'm going to kind of come back to this planning slide. Let me know if anybody needs me to go back. But basically, you want to look at a lot of your own data from a variety of different sources, things like Search Console, Google Analytics, and your own sales data, wherever you're able to get that, and understand what's doing the best for you, particularly from organic search and from your content efforts historically. But you may not have a lot of historical search data, right? So maybe your site's not getting 7,000 to 10,000 uniques and it's not stuck there. Maybe it's stuck at like 500 uniques a month, right? So if that's where your site is stuck, then you need to go outside and look at other sources and see what other people are doing. So competitive research is a great way to do this. So what are your competitors ranking for is a really good first step. So again, SEMRush is my favorite competitive tool, but SpyFu and Keyword Spy have really similar data, and you may like one of those better. So you can look in those tools and you can kind of see a screenshot. Okay, this is a site called The Sweet Home, which covers similar topics to what our site does. And we can see, okay, what are they getting traffic for? Oh, wow, they're ranking really well. And for some of these terms that have a lot of search volume, those might be interesting topics for us. Now, as you're doing competitive research, there are a few important things to keep in mind. One, you want to pick the right competitors. And what I mean by that is, what are these people ranking for, and can you actually rank for it? So if betterhomesandgardens.com, which has a really strong brand and has tons of links, is ranking for something with a really short page about it, we can't just replicate that same thing on a site that doesn't have a strong brand and doesn't have a lot of authoritative links. We might be able to rank for that term, but we might need to use a different strategy, and we might need to get more links than their page does. We might need to have longer content, right? And the other thing you want to think about as you look at what competitors are doing is, are they even doing a good job and targeting the right thing? So if you see a site that seems really smart, if you know somehow, maybe you've like talked to people within your industry and you know that they're generating a lot of traffic and they're really good at content marketing, then that's a good company to look at. But if they're not doing a lot of content marketing, if you don't have reason to believe that they're actually driving a lot of traffic, you don't want to replicate their potentially failing strategy, right? And a really good resource that's linked to here is Nick Eubanks has a great post on a process that you can walk through to try to figure out if you can better rank for a term, because that's always a very difficult thing to tell, because there are, Google's algorithm has hundreds of inputs, and it's sometimes difficult to tell if you'll actually be able to rank for a term. So you can use that to model out, but a good way to do this, I think, is to look at similarly sized, smart competitors, see some of the topics that they're ranking for, and look for opportunities where it's a good topic for you that you can write about, and you can write something better than what exists, better than what the competitor has, because if you do the same thing or a little bit worse, they're already there with that type of content asset, so that might not work. So we'll get a little bit more into the different types of content assets as we go here. So another thing is your competitors may be tipping their hand, right? So I gave an example here, and this is really popular within the online marketing niche, but in some other, if you see like food blogs and things like this doing this too. So income reports. So you might be able to find, maybe there's an income report that a site in your niche has shared where they're showing exactly what works. And there's a lot of different flavors of this. Your niche might not have income reports, but maybe big companies with quarterly earnings, you can understand more about which product lines drive actual revenue for them. So that could be interesting data for you. Maybe there's a blog that's just really transparent where they're sharing a lot of information about what they're doing. Maybe you have an opportunity to kind of look through some of their case studies and see some of the things that have worked for them and some of the places where they're making the most money, where they've grown their business the most. Maybe you can talk to somebody who used to work at that company, works at that company, right? And have a conversation and better understand what's working for some of your competitors. And another way that I really like to do competitive research, and we did this a lot as we were looking at new topics to target, is see what your competitors are highlighting. So in the same way that when we thought about, okay, how can we get more traffic? Well, let's highlight the stuff that's really worked well and try to get even more of that profitable traffic, try to bump those pages up for valuable search results. Your competitors are doing that too, right? So especially your smart competitors. So if you think that your competitors are doing a really good job with SEO and content marketing, see what they're highlighting, right? See what's in their sidebar. So here we see like, Sweet Home is looking at, best deals, holiday guides. They have a new empty nesters guide. You see what topics are in static navigation elements. So like what's on the top of their page all the time, what's in their footer all the time, what's in their right nav all the time, because those are the pages that are, in all likelihood, again, if you're picking the right competitors, those are the pages that are driving traffic and revenue for those guys. So those can be really good indications of areas that you can focus, content that you can create for your own site. So how do you get additional content ideas beyond just competitive research? So another way that's great is really think about your prospects, right? So don't just think about a keyword. Don't just use a keyword tool, and we'll talk about some of the keyword tools that you can use. Those are helpful. But actually think about the people who would buy your product or come to your site, consume your content, and ask yourself questions about those people and how you can help them, right? So who's buying your product? What problems do those people wrestle with? What content do they consume on other sites? How can you solve those problems, right? So think about content, again, right? Like back to the stuff that wasn't working. Don't just talk about yourself and how great your solution is. Think about your prospect and your customer and how you can solve problems for them. And some great ways to get these kinds of content ideas, talk to people. So actually have a conversation with people who either, maybe through usability tests, people who come to your site, talk to your prospects, talk to your customers, talk to, depending on the type of business you have, a great way to do this and to understand the problems that people are having and some of the language that they use to describe, problems in your solution, is to actually talk to your customer service or sales teams, right? And make that like a regular kind of standing thing every quarter and say like, what are the biggest complaints? What are the biggest, objections that people have to buying? What are some of the problems that these people are having outside of what our software solves, so that you can create content around that. A couple of things that we find work really well. So obviously we're doing work for clients, so a lot of times we come into a new niche that we're not as familiar with, and we need to find some ways to kind of get familiar with some of the language and some of the problems that people have quickly. So looking at conference agendas is a great way. A conference organizer has a lot of financial incentive to create something that's interesting for the people going to that conference. So if there's a conference where you know that your prospects frequent, look at what the conference agenda looks like. What are the topics that people are covering? What are the different tracks? What are the different kinds of, what are the most popular presentations? And you might be able to take a presentation there and turn it into a content asset on your own site. Look at forums and Q&A sites. So that might be, again, depends on your niche. You might have a niche-specific forum. Maybe there's a subreddit on reddit.com. Maybe there's, some information on Quora where people are asking and answering questions. And again, what you want to try to do is identify areas where you have expertise and you can provide a better resource than what you see out there and really solve a problem that people are looking to have solved. Another thing is to look at the top publications in your niche and see what they get search traffic for and what gets shared. So for search traffic, again, SEMRush and some of the competitive tools are good. For what gets shared, BuzzSumo is a great tool, and it'll show you the most shared articles for a specific domain. So in this case, again, we look at Better Homes and Garden, and we see some of the topics that get most shared from Better Homes and Garden. Now, our site's probably not going to get, or certainly not going to get 600,000 shares writing about kitchen organization and storage tips, but what we are learning is what's interesting and relevant to that audience. If it's the same audience as ours, that could be a powerful way to create some really useful content for those people and get some good ideas. So additional keyword research, again, free keyword tools, you definitely want to go beyond these and not just focus on specific keywords, but free keyword tools can be helpful too. So Google's free keyword planner is still a really good tool. I really like Ubersuggest, and actually going to google.com, especially if you're doing a specific blog topic, actually going to google.com and starting to type the kind of core topic. So, it might be carbon monoxide, and then let Google make a suggestion for what other things you might want to search for. So you'll see things like, carbon monoxide replacement, carbon monoxide detectors. And the reason that that's a really powerful thing is the Google Keyword Planner is giving you suggestions based on, but it's built for pay-per-click advertisers, right? So they're giving you suggestions based on what Google would like you to pay to bid on. So that information is helpful to give you a sense of relative search volume. Those numbers are not exact, and it can give you some good ideas. But the suggest data, I think, is actually even more pure, and Ubersuggest gives you, spits out kind of a big list of all the suggestions that Google would give you. That's even more pure because Google is using that data in response to their customer who is searching, right? So they're trying to show that person the most relevant search for them, and they're using all of their data and all the power of their algorithm to try to give them really helpful search suggestions that they would be interested in. So again, those can be really good topics for you too to write content around. So another piece that's really important of planning is, as you do all this kind of data collection, you look at, okay, let's look at our own site, let's look at competitors, let's use the keyword tool, let's think about our prospects. We have a big list now, hopefully, of potential content ideas. You can't just write, again, one of the biggest things I see with flat traffic is people writing, oh, we're going to write a blog post a week, a blog post a month, we're going to put it on our blog, and we're going to tweet it, and that's it, we're done. So you have to have an actual strategy and think about who's going to share your content and why would they want to share it, right? Like think beyond just your product and how great your product is, and why would this other person be incented to share it? So two things you want to think about here is doing research up front. So if you're writing like a really in-depth article, you want to try to identify the people who are going to link to it before you create the content even, right? And certainly before you publish. And then bake in a reason for people to link and share. So something we find works really well is to actually cite and link to valuable resources and then let those people know that they've been highlighted. I'll go through a couple of specific examples there, but that's really important. If you don't have a strategy for how people are going to share stuff before you get started, you're likely to fail, right? Because it's going to be very difficult to figure out on the fly, and as you're publishing stuff, you'll frequently find that people just won't share it. So outreach audience research. So this is a screenshot of a tool called Ahrefs. Which is another really helpful tool. And what you can do with tools like Ahrefs, Majestic SEO, and Moz have similar functionality. But what you can do is, here, I'm looking at a specific topic. So, I think, okay, we can write a really great guide on car seat safety. So let's see if there's actually a linking audience for this that we could actually get links from before we dedicate a lot of time and energy and resources to writing it. So what you can do is see all of the URLs that Ahrefs is aware of that have the most links on this topic. And that's really helpful because now you can kind of drill into those specific posts and see, okay, one, is this a type of post that I could replicate and, again, create something better than this post? Right? And two, are these people who are linking to this post, and if you see under RD, that's referring domains, if you click on any of those numbers within the interface, you can get the full list of all the people linking to that page. So you could say, okay, that about.com guide is pretty good, but I think we could do an even better guide, and let me look at the people linking to them. Do those look like do those look like people who would potentially link to my guide if I created a way better guide than what About has? And you have to, again, be honest about that. If it looks like they're just kind of friends of the people who created that guide, that might not be a good fit. If it looks like the links aren't that high quality, then again, you probably don't want to invest the time and energy to create a really comprehensive resource that's not going to get linked and shared, right? Just from an ROI perspective. So I have a list of a bunch of useful resources here. I'd recommend Point Blank SEO, backlinko.com, citationlabs.com, particularly Matthew Barbie and Blogger Sidekick guides here as well. And so again, outreach is kind of can kind of be its own beast, right? So there's a lot of information here, too much to kind of walk through every single piece of this. But you need to have an outreach strategy. You need to have something kind of married to the content that you're creating. So I'm going to run through the different types of content assets that you can create here. So in terms of the content assets, again, that we find work really well, one is best of lists. And actually, when we dug through the data and did our analysis on Safe Sound Family, we found that these did the best for Safe Sound Family in terms of both traffic and revenue. And basically what we're doing here is, again, we're coming at these with the idea that, okay, we're going to list a long list of resources, tools, products, right? Blogs could be like the best blogs in a specific niche, best podcasts, best quotes or tips on a specific topic. We're going to create a really big list, 25, 50, maybe even 100 of these tools, resources, quotes, and tips, and we're going to include those. We're going to give a little synopsis of each one, give people a little bit of information about each one. So if it's a product listing, you want to compare prices, you want to look at reviews, you want to link to the product itself, et cetera, et cetera. You want to give people a really big list, give them unbiased information, don't favor any one product or topic over another. So steer clear of things where like you would be in the list maybe, or your competitors might be in the list if you're thinking about ranking and doing a comparison, because you want these to be unbiased, useful resources. So these tend to be really useful resources for the person consuming them because they're searching for that particular topic. They really want a list. They tend to do really well in Google because they're really long assets. They're thousands of words, typically anywhere from like 2,000 plus words. And there's an incentive for everybody who's featured to share it, right? So we're saying like, oh, these are all the best products that you might be interested in around home automation software. So when we let those people know that they've been included in that list, a lot of them will tweet and some of them will link, right? So again, we have a distribution strategy and a way that these will get shared and linked to built in before we even create the content. A similar type of content, and you may have seen these, particularly in the internet marketing niche. They're really popular now. Expert roundups, group interviews, idea curation. So you take a kind of open-ended question, you try to get feedback from a number of different thought leaders within a niche, and you aggregate all of those answers and you put them in a really big document. Again, with these, we find the more the merrier. So if you can get maybe 20 responses, that tends to be a really good threshold to have a very, very meaty document that Google likes, that searchers will find really interesting because there's a lot of different perspectives and useful information in there. And once again, everybody featured is incented to share that asset. So for each of these, for the best of list and the group interview, we have a post on our site, cornerstonecontent.com, that kind of goes into more detail on the nitty-gritty of the process there. But basically, you want to kind of ask this question, aggregate those answers, and then package them in one big resource. So another content asset type is short posts and glossary pages. So I said, you don't want to just write a short post and put it up on your blog. But within the context of a larger strategy, things like shorter posts can work. So if you do a brief overview of a general topic, again, not self-promotional, not just talking about how great your company is, but actually kind of a 101 version of the topic, or if you give a really specific answer to a specific question and you just kind of get on the page, answer that question, and get off and solve the person's problem. So, and a great example of that might be like, a technical troubleshooting issue. So if you're, selling WordPress services and you give a really specific answer to like, hey, this thing is broken on my WordPress blog, how do I fix it? That really establishes you as a thought leader. You might get a lot of traffic for that because there might be a lot of people with that particular problem, and that can be useful content. So those things can work well too with minimal promotion. You can just kind of tweet that stuff, but you have to do that in the context of publishing other bigger assets that have more comprehensive promotion around them. Because if you have a blog where all you do is post shorter posts and don't do any promotion around them, they're not going to get any traffic. But if you have a blog where you've built up a lot of authority, you're getting a lot of links to other things, you're building relationships with people in your niche, and then as a mix, you kind of post, maybe for every larger post that you do 2 or 3 shorter posts. Those shorter posts will actually get shared and they'll start to rank because Google will see your whole site as authoritative. So another asset type is just in-depth articles and original studies, right? So you could aggregate data from a number of different sources in a way that nobody's done before. You could survey people in your niche. You could expose some proprietary data that you have. Maybe your client base, you can kind of anonymize that data, aggregate it, and share it in a way that's really interesting and has some interesting insights about how your clients solve specific problems or think about specific things related to your industry. And so these can be really, really valuable assets because, again, there's a lot of different ways to promote these. So PR is a great way to promote these. So, journalists are frequently looking for hard data, stories that they can build around different reports. They have, sort of a publishing quota that they're supposed to be reaching in many instances. So if you can give them some actual useful data that's, again, not self-promotional, not data like, hey, we've grown so much and our product is so great, but actual data about the industry that is going to be interesting, about the beat that they cover, then that can be a really powerful way to get links and mentions from journalists and from press hits. And you can do kind of research and outreach to resource lists. So really authoritative lists. You can, a lot of times these can get things like .gov links, links from schools, things like that, right? So that's another asset type. And so now, a key component of all this, as we talked about, you need to have inputs to get outputs. So you need to actually get to work, right, and create content consistently. And so what you should be able to do by this point, if you've done a lot of self-analysis, you've thought about these different content types, a couple things you should be able to do is, one, you want to play to your strengths, right? So you want to think about, okay, what could we actually create? And again, in the case of things like best of lists and group interviews, frequently that doesn't take a ton of domain expertise per se. It just takes a lot of work. Those assets take time to create. So, or in the case of an in-depth article, or in some of those shorter posts where you quickly solve a problem, those might not, might be take more domain expertise, right? But the shorter post particularly might take a lot less time, right? And the in-depth article might take more time. So map out kind of, okay, what resources can we actually create given what we have internally, whether it's a budget to hire somebody to do this, or whether it's the manpower inside your company. So what types of resources are going to be best for us, and how frequently can we create these, right? So what we find is if you do, we built to kind of 4 to 8 long form posts per month for Safe Sound Family, and that tended to be a good cadence, and I'll kind of show a quick little epilogue of what happened to traffic after we got that initial growth. But it might be, for you, it might be more like, there's really no specific set in stone magic number, but we do find that if you're doing something like at least 2 of these larger types of assets, whether it's a best of list, group interview, in-depth article per month, right, and 2 or more of the shorter assets in tandem, if you do that consistently over time, it takes frequently a couple months to start to really build traction, because not every single one of those assets will be a home run. Then you start to see really consistent compounding growth. What we frequently see is anywhere from 5 to 10% compounding growth month over month, and that starts to get really interesting and add up as you get to 6 months, 12 months, and 2 years. You'll frequently see doublings, or as in this case, kind of a 5x growth over 9 months, as we see kind of in the epilogue, we saw a 5x increase over 9 months. We continued to sustain that sort of publishing level and actually published even a little bit more aggressively and sort of reinvested some of the additional profits that we got from growing traffic and revenue. And we're able to 2x visitors again year over year in 2015. So we're at now, this site that went from 7 to 40,000 is now at more than 80,000 unique visitors from SEO in October. And again, the inputs there are to look at what had worked, to do more of the things that had worked, to better feature the things that were driving traffic and working well. And an important note, revenue growth corresponded with traffic growth. So that's an important thing to keep an eye on, right? So as you're publishing new content, you will see your traffic grow. So as your traffic is growing, you want to make sure that the revenue that that you have a way of attributing this, and that the revenue that you're generating from that increased traffic is showing corresponding growth. So that's the idea. That's what you're looking for. So that's the presentation. Really sorry again for all the technical difficulties and that we ran so long. But if you're interested in learning more about me, there's some information here. You can email me, follow me. And actually, we have a free content marketing guide. It's a PDF. You can go to the URL below or just go to cornerstonecontent.com. And it basically just kind of goes more in depth on each of these topics, and is obviously something you can kind of read at your own pace. So you might want to check that out if you found anything here helpful. So
okay, great. Yeah, we've done it. Yeah, we had 2 or 2.5 Tom Demers today for practice.
Right,
One.
right.
Indeed. Okay, I was very quick. I have to admit. Yeah, probably we have to recordings. We have to really kind of slow it down because yeah,
Sure.
well, I understand. Okay, guys, I don't know. Do we have any questions? It was extremely quick. Well, what we can hear, it was extremely quick. Okay, if you can't really put yourself together, you probably can. Okay, emails on the screen, so you can
Yep,
contact.
absolutely.
You can contact Tom over the Twitter or via email and ask him a question. Okay, Tom, thank you very much.
Great.
I
Thanks so
don't know
much.
what happened. So things
Sorry.
happen, but eventually we've done. We hear full of you a little bit faster probably than we get used to.
Sure.
And well, yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you all, guys. Sorry for technical glitches, but yeah, eventually who stayed with us, they managed to listen everything, to hear everything.
Thanks very much.
Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions? Okay, I guess no questions.